What would happen if a 10-year-old genius challenged one of the most powerful minds in tech to a showdown? The world had never seen anything like it before. A 10-year-old boy, no older than a fifth grader, had sent a letter to Elon Musk. The letter wasn't just a fan message or a naive request for an autograph, it was a challenge. And not just any challenge. It was a challenge to face off in a test of innovation. A contest of brains. A battle of genius. The kind of challenge that could change the world. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur behind companies like SpaceX and Tesla, had become accustomed to the world looking up to him. He had revolutionized space travel, redefined electric vehicles, and was now working on pushing humanity toward a multiplanetary future. But this was new. This was unexpected. And if there was one thing Elon Musk wasn't, it was someone who backed down from a challenge. As soon as he read the letter, something sparked in him. It was a mix of disbelief, curiosity, and excitement. A 10-year-old claiming to be a genius inventor. Someone who might be able to outthink him, outcreate him. The very idea seemed absurd at first, but as he read through the rest of the letter, Musk's doubts began to fade. The boy, Noah Thompson, had created a new kind of energy system, an AI-powered generator that could work independently of the grid. He had designed it himself, and apparently, it was working. Musk wasn't the kind of person to let anyone think they could outsmart him, especially someone so young. But he had to admit, there was something compelling about Noah's message. The boy wasn't asking for fame or fortune. He was asking for recognition. He wanted to test his mind against Musk's. The audacity of it. Musk could almost hear the challenge ringing in his ears. Can you out-innovate me, Mr. Musk? And so, he accepted. The public was quick to catch wind of this unusual contest. Media outlets jumped on the story. Headlines blared across social media, drawing attention from every corner of the globe. Elon Musk faces off with a 10-year-old genius. What happens next will shock you. The questions were endless. Could this child really challenge Musk, the titan of tech? What could a young mind possibly have to offer that Musk hadn't already seen? Was it all a stunt? Or was there something truly groundbreaking behind the boy's invention? The date for the showdown was set for a few weeks later. The rules were simple. Each of them would have 48 hours to present an invention of their own. It would be a test of creativity, practicality, and innovation, no holds barred. They would be given access to the same resources, the same technology, the same space. And in the end, it would be the public who decided who had won. The winner would have their project taken to the next level, funded, and possibly even put into production. It was the perfect blend of prestige, challenge, and opportunity. But for Musk, the stakes were higher than just a win. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain. Could he be outsmarted by a kid? A child with no real experience in the field? The possibility gnawed at him, and it drove him to dive deeper into his own work, perfecting his ideas and refining his projects. He couldn't afford to lose this battle. Not just for his ego, but for the future of his companies. As the days leading up to the contest began to unfold, Musk found himself torn between excitement and doubt. On one hand, he admired the boy's boldness. On the other, he knew that the world was watching. This wasn't just a friendly competition. This was about more than just winning. This was about the next frontier of innovation. In the meantime, Noah, the young prodigy, was preparing for the showdown in his own way. He wasn't nervous. In fact, he felt nothing but exhilaration. His invention was something that could change the world, something Musk would never expect, a system that could harness the power of artificial intelligence and renewable energy in a way that had never been done before. Noah had been tinkering with this idea since he was 8, and now, at the age of 10, he felt ready to present it to the world. Noah wasn't motivated by fame. He wasn't seeking a fortune, nor was he interested in proving that he was better than Musk. What drove him was a simple, burning desire to change the world. To fix the problems he saw every day. He had been raised by a family that encouraged his curiosity, his need to invent, and his passion for finding solutions to global challenges. His parents had always told him that he was capable of great things, but it wasn't until the invitation from Musk arrived that he realized just how much of an impact he could make. The night before the contest, Noah sat in his room, surrounded by blueprints, tools, and prototypes. His mind was racing with ideas. The 48-hour window felt like both an eternity and a mere blink of an eye. He had so many thoughts, so many ways this could go wrong, but his confidence never wavered. This was his moment. This was his chance to show the world that age didn't matter when it came to changing the future. The following day, both Musk and Noah arrived at the contest location, a sleek, high-tech innovation hub in the heart of Silicon Valley. The media had gathered in force, cameras flashing, reporters vying for a glimpse of the two competitors. Musk walked in with his usual calm demeanor, his mind already working on the task ahead. But when he saw Noah, standing at a makeshift workstation with his family by his side, something inside him shifted. There was a quiet determination in the boy's eyes, a fire that couldn't be ignored. Musk's competitive instincts kicked into overdrive. This wasn't going to be easy. The stage was set. The challenge was on. And the world was waiting. "Are you ready?" Musk asked, his voice steady but filled with an underlying tension. Noah looked up, a slight smile crossing his face. "I've been ready for a long time." The timer started, and with it, the race for innovation began. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was not born into the life of a billionaire. In fact, his journey to becoming one of the most influential figures in the world of technology and innovation was shaped by adversity, resilience, and an insatiable curiosity that started when he was just a boy. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, Elon's early life was far from the image of a Silicon Valley mogul. His parents, May and Errol Musk, divorced when he was young, and Elon spent much of his childhood feeling like an outsider. His father, Errol, was a successful engineer, but their relationship was strained. May, a model and dietitian, raised Elon and his younger brother, Kimball, with an emphasis on intellectual pursuit and independence. From an early age, Elon was immersed in books, often retreating to the quiet of his room to read anything he could get his hands on, science fiction, biographies, engineering books, anything that fed his hunger for knowledge. He was an awkward, introverted child, often the target of bullies at school. His passion for technology, however, was what kept him grounded. By the age of 12, Elon had already taught himself computer programming and created a video game called Blaster, which he sold for $500. This early entrepreneurial spirit would be a defining characteristic of his life, but it also marked the beginning of his drive to prove his worth to the world. His teenage years were a turbulent period of personal growth. Elon struggled with feelings of isolation and depression. He once described being bullied so badly at school that he was hospitalized after a group of boys threw him down a staircase. These formative experiences shaped his tenacity and fueled his ambition to escape the small-town life he was raised in. He yearned for more knowledge, more impact, more success. So, when the opportunity arose to move to Canada and later the United States, Elon took it without hesitation. He enrolled at Queen's University in Ontario at 17, later transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. But Musk's true calling wasn't academia, it was technology, entrepreneurship, and the pursuit of groundbreaking ventures that could change the world. His first real taste of success came when he co-founded Zip2, a company that provided online business directories for newspapers. Compaq acquired Zip2 for $307 million in 1999, giving Musk his first major payday. Musk's next venture, X.com, eventually became PayPal, revolutionizing the world of online payments. PayPal was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion in 2002. This marked a pivotal moment in Musk's career. he was a young millionaire with more opportunities than he knew what to do with. But instead of taking a backseat to enjoy his wealth, Musk reinvested his money into what he saw as the most important projects of the future: space exploration and sustainable energy. SpaceX, founded in 2002, became his boldest ambition. He was determined to make space travel affordable and, ultimately, to colonize Mars. Tesla, which he joined in 2004, was his commitment to revolutionizing the automotive industry by making electric vehicles mainstream. SolarCity, a company he co-founded in 2006, was part of his larger vision of creating a sustainable energy ecosystem. These ventures weren't without their challenges. Musk faced numerous failures along the way: companies that nearly went bankrupt, rockets that exploded, and public scrutiny that questioned his ability to deliver. But through it all, Musk's resilience was unmatched. He was determined to change the world, no matter the cost. He believed in the power of technology to solve humanity's greatest problems, from climate change to interplanetary colonization. His journey, though filled with hardships, was a testament to the power of vision and perseverance. Yet, despite all his successes, something was missing. As Musk continued to break barriers and redefine what was possible, there was a growing sense of emptiness. His work was changing the world, but he found little satisfaction in the process. He was known for his relentless work ethic, often putting in 100-hour weeks, but it came at the cost of personal relationships and his own mental health. The pressure was unrelenting. He had made billions, but was it enough? It wasn't until the letter from Noah arrived, challenging him to a contest of minds, that Musk began to feel the excitement of invention again. It wasn't just another venture or business deal, this was personal. A child, a 10-year-old with the audacity to challenge him, was forcing Musk to confront his own assumptions about innovation. For the first time in years, Musk found himself questioning whether his experiences, his knowledge, his expertise, were enough in the face of pure, untapped brilliance. As the clock ticked toward the contest, Musk was reflecting on his journey, his struggles, his triumphs, his vision for the future. But the one thing he couldn't escape was the question that Noah had unwittingly posed: could a child really teach him something new? The pressure was mounting, but it also lit a fire in Musk that he hadn't felt in years. It was no longer about competing with other tech moguls or proving that he was the smartest person in the room. It was about facing off with someone whose mind was as sharp as his own, someone who had the potential to change the world in ways he had never imagined. For once, it wasn't about being the best, it was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible, and maybe, just maybe, learning something along the way. As the date of the contest drew near, Elon Musk stood at the precipice of something big. He was ready. But little did he know, this encounter with a 10-year-old genius was about to take him on a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about innovation, competition, and the future of technology. The day had finally arrived. The world was watching. News outlets from across the globe had descended on Silicon Valley, eager to witness the showdown between the renowned Elon Musk and the mysterious 10-year-old genius, Noah Thompson. Cameras flashed, reporters scrambled, and anticipation buzzed in the air. This wasn't just a competition, it was an event that could reshape the narrative around innovation and age. Noah stood quietly at his workstation, adjusting his glasses and surveying the tools he had carefully chosen for the task ahead. His eyes were calm, unwavering. This was the moment he had been preparing for all his life. No one had expected him to get this far, and yet here he was, facing one of the most powerful minds in the tech world. Elon Musk, on the other hand, looked like the seasoned professional he was. Dressed in his usual attire, black t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, he exuded a quiet confidence. There was no doubt he was used to being in the spotlight, used to high-stakes situations. But there was something different about today. The challenge of facing a child prodigy who had crafted something so extraordinary, something Musk hadn't yet fully grasped, gnawed at him. It wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding how far ahead the kid might be. The room was designed like a futuristic laboratory: glass walls, sleek workstations, and a minimalist feel. At the center of the space were two long tables, each stocked with cutting-edge tools and technology. Both Musk and Noah had access to the same materials, the same set of resources, and the same limited time. The challenge was clear: come up with something new, something groundbreaking, and something that could shift the course of humanity's future. The timer started. Noah immediately dove into his task, his mind racing with ideas. The world might see him as a child, but in his mind, he was just another inventor, trying to solve problems that had plagued humanity for years. The project he was working on wasn't just about creating something cool, it was about making a real-world impact. His energy system, which was powered by artificial intelligence and designed to be completely autonomous, could solve some of the planet's most pressing energy problems. It was a renewable energy source that could function independent of traditional grids, a game-changer in the fight against climate change. Musk's mind, however, was a whirlwind of strategies and calculations. He wasn't used to not having the upper hand, and this challenge was forcing him to think differently. He wasn't just going to rely on his usual playbook. This contest required something more, something new. Musk began to sketch out an ambitious idea of his own, a new kind of electric propulsion system that could revolutionize space travel, making it faster and more affordable than ever before. He had designed concepts for reusable rockets, but this time, he wanted to push the boundaries even further. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the room grew more intense. The competitors were deeply focused, their minds working in overdrive. The silence was palpable, broken only by the sound of clicking keyboards, the whir of machines, and the occasional murmur of someone deep in thought. But the tension between the two couldn't be ignored. Every once in a while, Musk would glance over at Noah, watching the young inventor work with a concentration that rivaled his own. There was something unsettling about the boy's calm demeanor. How could he be so composed, knowing that the world was watching? Musk, on the other hand, was used to pressure, but this felt different. He had been in countless high-stakes situations, but facing someone with nothing to lose, someone who wasn't driven by money or fame, someone who might just be more clever than he was a new kind of challenge. Noah was fully aware of the weight of the moment. He knew that many were skeptical of his abilities. People saw him as just a child with a big idea, someone who had no business going up against someone like Musk. But he didn't let that affect him. In fact, he thrived under the pressure. The doubts of others only fueled his determination. This wasn't just about proving himself, it was about showing the world that genius had no age limit. That innovation didn't belong to the wealthy and powerful alone, it could come from anywhere, from anyone. As the hours passed, small tensions began to rise. Musk's calculations weren't adding up the way he had hoped, and he found himself stuck on a technical issue with his propulsion system. He cursed under his breath, running his fingers through his hair. He wasn't used to failure, not like this. His thoughts started to race, his mind jumping from one idea to the next. He had to solve this, and he had to do it quickly. Noah, however, appeared to be moving forward with ease. He wasn't just solving problems, he was anticipating them, finding solutions before they even arose. He worked with a fluidity that Musk couldn't ignore. There were moments when Musk would glance at the boy's workstation and see Noah calmly adjusting a piece of his design, his mind clearly in control. It wasn't arrogance, it was confidence, the kind of confidence Musk hadn't seen in many people, especially not in someone so young. The audience that had gathered to watch was in awe. This wasn't just a competition, it was a clash of intellects, a battle between a seasoned genius and a young prodigy. There were whispers among the crowd, murmurs of disbelief, as people wondered aloud whether Musk had finally met his match. As the clock neared the final stretch, Musk's frustration was palpable. The technical roadblock he had encountered seemed insurmountable, and the more he worked on it, the more he felt the pressure mounting. Meanwhile, Noah was steadily progressing, confident and unwavering. It wasn't just the clock ticking down, it was the feeling that the world was watching, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. Musk had never been in a position like this. He was used to being the one in control, the one who knew all the answers. But now, for the first time in a long while, he was in the unfamiliar position of uncertainty. Noah, on the other hand, felt the weight of his own expectations. He couldn't afford to let himself be distracted by Musk's reputation or the eyes of the world. This wasn't about him versus Musk, it was about bringing his idea to life. It was about showing that sometimes the most innovative minds come from the most unexpected places. And maybe, just maybe, he was on the brink of proving that genius didn't have an age limit. With only minutes left on the clock, both inventors were nearing the end of their work. It was clear that the contest had become something far more than just a battle of minds. It had become a test of resilience, patience, and ingenuity. But who would come out on top? The answer, as it turned out, would leave everyone, Musk included, speechless. The final seconds of the competition ticked down like a ticking time bomb. The room had grown quiet, save for the frantic clattering of keyboards, the occasional hum of machinery, and the soft but persistent tapping of fingers on glass touchscreens. The energy in the room had shifted. What started as a controlled and intense race against time had now transformed into something far more intense. The weight of the challenge was settling in, and the outcome was uncertain. Noah's heart was pounding, but his focus was unshaken. He had completed his design, the framework for a new, autonomous renewable energy grid powered by AI, capable of learning and adapting to environmental changes. It was something that could, in theory, solve global energy crises. Noah believed deeply in the project, in the idea that the world could be powered by clean energy without depending on fossil fuels. This challenge was his moment to prove that age wasn't a barrier to innovation. As the clock wound down, he double-checked every detail, tweaked algorithms, verified energy outputs, and ensured that everything was running as smoothly as possible. On the opposite side of the room, Elon Musk was deep in thought. His hands were moving quickly across his design, trying to fix the propulsion system that had stumped him earlier. The deadline was looming, but Musk was far from being finished. In his mind, he was replaying every calculation, every adjustment he had made. He knew that what he was building, a new, more efficient rocket propulsion system, could be revolutionary for SpaceX and the future of space exploration. But could he finish it in time? And more importantly, would it be good enough to win? Musk's usual confidence was giving way to doubt. He had been in high-pressure situations before, but never quite like this. The countdown hit its final seconds. Elon and Noah's creations were about to be revealed to the world, and the stakes had never been higher. And then, it happened. Elon's computer screen flickered, his design glitching out in a spectacular display of error messages and malfunctioning codes. The propulsion system, which had seemed so close to perfection just moments ago, was suddenly a complete failure. Musk stared at the screen, wide-eyed, his fingers frozen over the keyboard. His heart sank. For a man who had launched reusable rockets into space, whose name was synonymous with groundbreaking innovations, this was not something he had anticipated. The pressure of the competition, the weight of expectations, and the realization that his ideas had come crashing down, it all hit him at once. Meanwhile, Noah was watching the entire scene unfold with a sense of quiet understanding. He had seen this kind of thing happen before, people like Musk, brilliant and successful, but too caught up in their own expectations. The reality was that no one, not even Elon Musk, could predict the outcome of everything. There were too many variables. But Noah wasn't gloating. This wasn't about beating Musk, this was about pushing the limits of what he could do, about showing the world that age wasn't a barrier to greatness. His project was now running smoothly. The algorithms were functioning as expected. The energy system he had designed could, with the proper resources, power entire cities. It was both groundbreaking and practical. Still, he couldn't ignore the way the atmosphere had changed. Musk had hit a wall, and that shift in energy filled the room with an unspoken tension. He wasn't just competing with Musk now, he was facing a far deeper question about the nature of innovation and what it meant to fail. Elon slowly pushed away from his workstation, his eyes still fixed on the broken system in front of him. He took a deep breath. His usual brash confidence was gone. For the first time in a long while, Elon Musk was facing a deep sense of humility. Was it possible that this young genius, this child who had only just begun to explore the vast world of technology, could teach him something that no one else had? Noah walked over to Musk's table, quietly observing the failed system. There was no victory dance, no boasting. Just a calm, thoughtful gaze. "You know," Noah said, breaking the silence, "I think the propulsion system could work if you adjusted the intake mechanism. I saw some discrepancies in your pressure readings." Musk blinked, staring at the boy who had spoken with such ease. His immediate reaction was a mix of surprise and disbelief. It was one thing to be defeated by someone, it was another to have that person help you understand where you went wrong. Noah, still cool-headed, continued, "I've been studying propulsion systems for years. I think I can help you fix it, if you want." Elon paused. The words hung in the air for a long moment. He had spent years, decades, building his own legacy. He wasn't used to asking for help, let alone from a child. Yet, something about Noah's calmness, his composure, and the sheer clarity of his reasoning made Musk realize that there was no shame in listening. Perhaps, it wasn't about being the best at everything, it was about being open to learning, even when the source of that knowledge was unexpected. "I'd appreciate that," Musk replied, his voice quieter than usual. Noah smiled faintly and pulled up a stool next to Musk's workstation. He began explaining the small tweaks that could improve the design, talking through each calculation and process. As he spoke, Musk listened intently, absorbing the details, realizing that there were aspects of his design that he had overlooked. The humility in that moment was profound for Musk, a stark contrast to his usual demeanor. The two worked together, Musk making adjustments, Noah offering suggestions, and both of them collaborating in a way neither had ever expected. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't just about winning anymore. The challenge had morphed into something far more important, a shared understanding of what it truly meant to innovate. The last 5 minutes felt like hours. Musk's eyes widened in realization as the propulsion system began to function. The calculations Noah had pointed out were correct. The system was finally working, just as it should. There was no dramatic explosion or sudden eureka moment. It was simply the quiet hum of something functioning as it was intended. With only seconds left, Noah glanced at Musk, who was smiling, a look of genuine appreciation in his eyes. "You did it," Elon said, nodding. Noah shrugged modestly, though a small grin tugged at the corner of his lips. "We did it." The clock finally buzzed, signaling the end of the contest. Both of their projects were finished, each representing an entirely different facet of human ingenuity. The room filled with applause, and the cameras clicked furiously as reporters rushed to capture the moment. In that moment, however, neither Musk nor Noah felt the need to be declared the winner. The real victory, they both realized, was in the process, the journey of learning, collaborating, and creating something bigger than themselves. It wasn't just about who had the most groundbreaking idea. It was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible, no matter who you were. The room was alive with the sounds of murmurs and applause, but the true drama of the moment wasn't in the noise or the excitement of the reporters. It was in the silence that had settled between Elon Musk and Noah Thompson. They stood side by side, their faces lit by the soft glow of their respective screens, their minds still processing the sheer magnitude of what had just transpired. The competition was over. But what did it really mean? Noah's heart pounded as the final whistle blew. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. He had done it. He had not only completed the challenge but had successfully collaborated with one of the greatest innovators of the modern era, someone who, just a few hours ago, had seemed like an untouchable giant. The magnitude of the achievement was sinking in, but there was no time to process it fully. The cameras were flashing, the microphones were thrust in their faces, and the world was eager for a verdict. Who won? A reporter shouted from the crowd, his voice cutting through the excitement like a knife. The question hung in the air, an impossible one to answer. Noah didn't know how to respond. His mind was spinning, not with thoughts of victory, but with the sheer weight of what had just occurred. He hadn't expected this moment of realization that, no matter how old or young you were, innovation and collaboration had no age limit. The victory didn't lie in being the best, or the most brilliant, it lay in the ability to learn, adapt, and, most importantly, help one another. But as the spotlight shifted back to Musk, there was a palpable tension. He wasn't used to losing, and though he hadn't won the challenge in the traditional sense, he had come away with something far more valuable. A humbling realization. He had just experienced a moment of vulnerability, a rare instance where his brilliance had faltered. He had been forced to seek help, to lean on the very thing he had often dismissed, the power of collaboration. And what had he learned from Noah? Not just technicalities or clever solutions, but something deeper. The boy had shown him a side of innovation Musk himself had overlooked, a side that didn't revolve around ego or control, but about sharing knowledge, about seeing the potential in everyone, even when they were still growing, still learning. It was a sobering lesson in humility, in recognizing that sometimes, even the most brilliant minds could benefit from the perspectives of others. The interviewers, eager to get to the bottom of the tension, pressed forward. Elon, what do you think? You've just worked with Noah on his energy system, do you think there's something groundbreaking in it? Musk paused, his eyes lingering on the boy beside him, his expression inscrutable. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could have easily dismissed the young genius, as some in the industry had done before, but something stopped him. I don't think it's just a breakthrough, Musk said, his voice steady, yet carrying an unexpected weight. What Noah has built here is revolutionary. It's not just an idea, it's something that could actually change the world. If it works as he says it does, we could be looking at a new way to power cities, a sustainable and independent energy grid. That's not something we take lightly. Noah glanced up at Musk, surprised by his words. He hadn't expected Musk to be so open, so honest about the potential of his work. The compliment felt surreal, almost too much to process. But it was real. The validation, the recognition from someone he had looked up to for so long, was overwhelming. And what about you, Noah? Another reporter asked. Do you think there's anything Musk could take from your work? What did you learn today? Noah smiled softly, the tension in his chest beginning to ease. I think the biggest thing I learned today was that even the brightest minds, like Elon, sometimes need help. It's not about being the smartest or most accomplished, it's about having the humility to listen, to accept that there's always something new to learn. I think that's the essence of innovation. The room fell quiet at Noah's words. It wasn't the usual bravado or ego you'd expect from someone in a competition against one of the world's top innovators. It was something deeper, something genuine. The silence in the room wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, as if the audience was coming to terms with a new truth, one that was uncomfortable but profound. Elon Musk turned to Noah, his face softening with a smile. You're right. Maybe I've been too focused on being the one who leads the way. Maybe it's time to recognize that the future isn't about going it alone. The future is about collaboration. Noah nodded, meeting Musk's gaze. For the first time, it wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about mutual respect and shared vision. They weren't competitors anymore, they were partners in a larger journey, one that would shape the world in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. A cheer erupted from the audience, but it wasn't just because of the competition. It was because the world had just witnessed something far bigger than a battle of minds. They had seen a true moment of emotional growth, humility, and the power of coming together. For the first time, the lines between age, experience, and success seemed blurred, and the possibilities seemed endless. As the interview wound down and reporters scrambled to get their last questions in, Noah and Elon shared one final, quiet exchange. There were no words. Just a shared understanding, a deep respect for each other's journey, and the unspoken realization that their futures, though different, were now linked by a singular truth: the best ideas often come from the most unexpected places. Elon Musk had always been known for pushing boundaries, for challenging the status quo. But today, he had learned that sometimes, true innovation doesn't come from being the smartest or the strongest, it comes from being willing to listen, to learn, and to collaborate with those who are willing to walk alongside you. The future, it seemed, was wide open. The days following the competition were a whirlwind for both Noah and Elon. The media buzzed with interviews, analyses, and speculations. The world was still processing the unexpected collaboration between the young genius and the tech mogul. But while the press conferences and interviews continued, both Noah and Musk had more pressing matters on their minds, matters that weren't about fame or recognition, but about the real potential of what had just happened. Noah returned home to his small apartment, the hum of the city outside his window a stark contrast to the silence that had settled over him. He sat on his bed, staring at the countless notifications on his phone, messages from friends, family, and people he had never met before, all congratulating him. But despite the recognition, Noah felt a deep, almost overwhelming sense of quiet. The truth was, he hadn't expected any of this. He hadn't set out to change the world or to compete with Elon Musk. He had simply wanted to prove to himself that he could do something meaningful, that he could build something that mattered. And now, that quiet sense of accomplishment felt like both a victory and a heavy burden. His phone buzzed again. It was a message from his mom. "I saw the interview. You made us all so proud. Whatever happens next, remember that you've already achieved more than anyone could have imagined. Keep pushing forward, baby." Noah smiled faintly at the words. His mother had always been his biggest supporter, and now, even though everything had changed, her support hadn't wavered. She saw him not as a child prodigy, not as a competitor, but as her son. And in that, there was a comfort he hadn't realized he needed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Elon Musk was sitting in his office, staring at a blank screen. The weight of the events in the competition still weighed heavily on him. Musk had always been a perfectionist, driven by an unrelenting desire to innovate, to push boundaries, to conquer new frontiers. But this time, the drive was different. It wasn't about breaking records or launching rockets into space, it was about something far more fundamental. It was about what it meant to truly innovate. He ran his fingers over the desk, deep in thought. It wasn't just the propulsion system that had impressed him, it was Noah's mindset. The young boy had approached their collaboration not with ego or arrogance but with humility. Noah had been unafraid to offer help, unafraid to share his ideas, and unafraid to admit that sometimes, even the greatest minds needed assistance. Musk knew that in the world of tech, there was a deep, ingrained obsession with individual achievement. His own career had been built on that very ethos, the idea of being the lone visionary, the one who saw what others didn't, the one who took risks when no one else would. But now, he couldn't help but wonder if that approach was limiting. Maybe the true innovators were those who understood that progress didn't come from individual effort alone, it came from collaboration, from building upon the ideas of others, from realizing that the greatest breakthroughs often come from unexpected sources. Elon's gaze turned to a small, framed photo on his desk, a picture of his children. The thought crossed his mind that perhaps his legacy wouldn't be defined by rockets or electric cars, but by the future he helped shape for others. The future that Noah, with his youthful ambition and unshakable belief in the power of collaboration, was now a part of. As the days passed, Elon reached out to Noah. The conversation was simple, almost casual, but its implications were anything but. "You know, Noah, I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Musk said over the phone. "I wanted to let you know that you've inspired me. I think there's something more here than just a competition. Something that could change how we approach innovation." Noah, still caught in the whirlwind of his own thoughts, responded carefully. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time we start something together," Elon said, his voice clear with purpose. "Something bigger than both of us. I have the resources, and you have the ideas. Together, we could create something that might actually change the world in ways we can't even fully imagine yet." Noah felt his heart skip a beat. Was this real? A collaboration? With Elon Musk? But, what about everything you've already built? Noah asked, the question almost slipping out before he realized it. You've already done so much, haven't you? Musk chuckled softly on the other end. That's exactly why I'm reaching out. I've done a lot, but I think we're just scratching the surface. The world is changing faster than we realize, and sometimes, the future comes from the most unexpected places. I'm ready to partner up, Noah. I'm ready to learn from you. Let's see where we can take this. Noah felt a rush of emotions. There was excitement, of course, but also a humbling sense of responsibility. He had come into this competition as a kid with an idea, not knowing that it would lead to this. But now, as Musk's words settled in, Noah realized that this was the start of something new, something much bigger than himself. This wasn't just about proving he could be the best, this was about making a difference. The next few weeks were a blur of planning and organizing. Noah and Elon began discussing their shared vision, building sustainable energy solutions, revolutionizing transportation, and even reshaping the way the world thought about technology. The possibilities were endless. And for the first time, Noah wasn't just a participant in someone else's dream. He was a partner in something that could change the world. On the day they announced their partnership, the world took notice. The news spread like wildfire, two unlikely collaborators, from different generations and backgrounds, joining forces to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges. The announcement wasn't just a media event, it was a moment of clarity. A reminder that the future wasn't just shaped by individual effort, but by the coming together of minds, the blending of ideas, and the willingness to embrace what was possible, even when it seemed impossible. Noah Thompson, the 10-year-old genius who had once been just a hopeful dreamer, was now standing shoulder to shoulder with Elon Musk, ready to change the world together. And as Noah stood in front of the cameras, his eyes scanning the crowd, he couldn't help but think back to the beginning of this journey, the moments of doubt, the moments of fear, the moments of triumph. It had all led to this point. The world had just witnessed something extraordinary, but for Noah, this was just the beginning. The journey was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The days following the announcement of their partnership felt like a blur of activity. What had started as a simple competition had now transformed into a global event, and the world was watching to see what Noah Thompson and Elon Musk would do next. They had set the bar high, and the pressure to deliver was immense. But despite the weight of the expectations, both of them knew one thing for certain: they were ready. This was more than a business venture. It was a mission. A mission to change the world. Noah sat in his newly designed workspace, a sleek, futuristic room that Musk had insisted on setting up for him. The room was filled with state-of-the-art technology, from holographic screens to interactive projectors, and it was meant to symbolize a new chapter in both their careers. A chapter that merged innovation with imagination. He glanced around, half in awe and half in disbelief. This was it. The dream he had once only dared to imagine was now a reality. The first project they tackled together was ambitious, to say the least. It wasn't just about coming up with a new invention or a new piece of technology, it was about solving one of the most pressing problems the world faced today: sustainable energy. Their goal was to create a fully renewable energy source that could power entire cities without relying on fossil fuels. It was a challenge that many believed impossible. But then again, when had either Noah or Elon ever shied away from the impossible? As the weeks went by, the team of engineers, designers, and scientists they had assembled worked tirelessly. The project, which had started as a dream, was slowly taking shape. Solar panels, wind turbines, and advanced energy storage systems were integrated into a new model, one that was not only efficient but scalable on a global level. The first prototype was coming to life, and Noah couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement every time he walked into the lab. Elon, too, seemed invigorated by the project. It was the challenge he had been waiting for, one that would push the boundaries of technology in ways he had never imagined. He had always been a man of big ideas, but this was something different. This wasn't about creating the next big gadget or car. This was about reshaping the way the world consumed and distributed energy. One afternoon, as the team gathered for a critical meeting to discuss their progress, Elon stood at the front of the room, his usual confidence tempered with a rare intensity. "All right, everyone," he began, his voice steady but full of determination. "This is more than just a project. This is the future of energy. And we are the ones who are going to make it happen. We can't afford to get this wrong. The world is depending on us." Noah, sitting in the front row, could feel the weight of Elon's words. This wasn't just a venture for them. This wasn't about making headlines or earning money. This was about solving a global crisis. It was daunting, but it was also incredibly exciting. The possibility that their work could one day change the way the world powered itself was a feeling unlike any other. The team worked late into the night, fine-tuning the prototype and preparing for the first public demonstration. There were setbacks, of course. Some systems didn't perform as expected, and there were moments of doubt. But through it all, Noah and Elon remained focused. They pushed through the challenges, refusing to let anything stand in the way of their shared vision. Finally, the day of the big demonstration arrived. The world's media had gathered at the newly built facility where the prototype was set to be unveiled. News outlets, tech bloggers, and government officials were all in attendance, eager to see the next big thing that would come out of this unlikely partnership. Noah and Elon stood side by side, looking out at the crowd. It was a moment that felt surreal. Just a few months ago, they had been competitors, each working on their own projects. Now, they were united by a common goal, standing together at the forefront of a revolution in energy. Elon took the microphone first, his usual charisma on full display. "We're about to show you something that, up until now, many thought was impossible," he said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "But what we've built here is not just a prototype. It's the future. A future where the world no longer relies on fossil fuels. A future where we can harness the power of nature to fuel our cities, our homes, and our lives. This is just the beginning." The crowd fell silent as the large screens behind Elon flickered to life. On them, a video played, showing the progress of their project, massive wind farms, solar fields, and the intricate energy storage systems they had developed. It was a vision of a clean, sustainable future, one that could power entire nations without harming the environment. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The prototype itself, a sleek, high-tech energy grid, was unveiled in all its glory. The crowd watched in awe as the grid powered up for the first time, its lights flickering on with a quiet hum. It was working. The energy was flowing, clean and efficient. A cheer erupted from the crowd. For the first time, people saw that what Noah and Elon had promised wasn't just a dream. It was a reality. Noah's heart raced as he watched the grid come to life. It wasn't just the technology that amazed him, it was the fact that they had made it happen together. He had been a small part of something much bigger than himself. He was part of a team that had made the impossible possible. As the applause filled the air, Noah turned to Elon, his face breaking into a wide smile. "We did it," he said quietly, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. Elon grinned back, his eyes shining with pride. "No, Noah. You did it. We all did it." For a moment, they stood there, side by side, taking in the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. The future was here. And it was only the beginning. But as Noah gazed out at the sea of reporters and cameras, he realized that this wasn't the end of their journey. It was just another step in a much larger mission. The world was watching, and now it was up to them to lead the way. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Noah knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone. And with Elon by his side, there was no limit to what they could accomplish together. As the event came to a close and the crowd slowly dispersed, Noah couldn't help but smile. This was just the start of something incredible. The weeks following the successful launch of their energy project were nothing short of a whirlwind. Noah and Elon had ignited a spark in the tech world that quickly spread to the political, environmental, and financial sectors. Their demonstration had proven that sustainable energy, powered by cutting-edge technology, was not just a pipe dream. It was a viable solution to one of the world's most pressing problems. But as the initial excitement settled, Noah and Elon both knew that what had begun as a single prototype was just the first step. Now, it was time to scale. In the high-rise conference room of their headquarters, a large map of the world sprawled across the wall. It was dotted with pin markers in cities from every continent, places where their energy grid could make the most impact. But there was a glaring truth they had to face: bringing the technology to a global scale wasn't going to be easy. "All right, let's break this down," Elon said, standing at the front of the room with a laser pointer in hand. "We've got the tech. The grid works. But what we're looking at now is infrastructure, massive distribution, partnerships with governments, and getting the right funding. This is going to take years, not months." Noah, sitting at the table with a small group of engineers and project managers, nodded. "But it's possible, right? I mean, if we break it down into smaller regions and focus on starting with a few countries first, we can get the ball rolling." Elon smiled, always impressed by Noah's clarity and forward thinking. "Exactly. Start small, scale quickly. But we'll need to work with global energy regulators, secure funding from private investors, and most importantly, prove that this technology works on a larger scale. If we can get a handful of countries to sign on, we can prove that this is the future." It was a daunting task. But Noah had come a long way since the days of building small-scale inventions in his basement. This wasn't just about creating another product, it was about shaping the future of how the world powered itself. This was about saving the planet, one innovation at a time. The team immediately got to work, dividing into smaller groups to focus on different aspects of the project. Some worked on the technological advancements needed to scale the energy grid, while others focused on building relationships with governments, energy regulators, and international organizations. For the first time in his life, Noah felt the weight of responsibility. What they were attempting was far beyond the realm of ordinary projects. They were trying to change the world. And, for the first time, it felt like they had the power to do it. While the technical team refined the energy grid, Noah and Elon focused on creating a global strategy. They traveled the world, meeting with heads of state, energy ministers, and environmental advocates. They were met with skepticism in some countries, eager support in others, and cautious optimism in a few. One of their first major meetings was with the European Union. The EU had long been a leader in the push for renewable energy, and Noah and Elon knew that getting their backing would be a significant milestone. The meeting was held in Brussels, in a sterile, high-tech conference room that felt more like a futuristic lab than a place for diplomacy. Noah sat beside Elon, feeling a tinge of nervousness as a panel of government officials filed in, ready to hear their pitch. Elon began the meeting, confidently laying out the technical specifications of the grid and the potential benefits of adopting the technology. He spoke passionately about the environmental impact, the potential to cut carbon emissions, and the cost-effectiveness of their energy grid. It was the type of vision that had built his empire, and it was clear that his charisma was working its magic. But when it came time for the officials to ask questions, the mood shifted. "What guarantees can you provide that this technology will be reliable on such a large scale?" one of the EU representatives asked, her arms crossed skeptically. Noah took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had spent countless hours poring over the project's data, but now was the moment to prove that a young mind could hold his own in front of some of the most influential leaders in the world. "The data we've collected from our test runs shows that the technology works in real-world conditions, not just in controlled environments," Noah said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "We've built a model that adapts to different geographic and weather conditions, and we've run simulations to prove that it can scale. But it's not just about the tech. It's about the people behind it. We're committed to making this work, and we're not walking away until it's done." The room fell silent for a moment, and Noah felt the weight of the gaze from the officials. Then, to his surprise, one of them nodded approvingly. "We'll need to see more data," the representative said, her tone softer now. "But I can see that you're serious. We'll start discussions about how to proceed." It was a victory, albeit a small one. But for Noah, it felt like a huge step forward. The EU wasn't completely on board yet, but they had shown interest, and in the world of politics, that was half the battle. Over the next few months, Noah and Elon continued to make headway. Their team expanded as they brought on experts from every corner of the globe. They secured initial funding from several high-profile investors who were eager to be part of this revolutionary project. And they began negotiations with countries across Africa, South America, and Asia, where the energy needs were most dire. As their project gained momentum, the media attention became more intense. Headlines read like a script for a science fiction movie: "A 10-year-old prodigy and a tech mogul are changing the future of energy." Some mocked the partnership, questioning whether a boy so young could truly have the knowledge to lead such an ambitious venture. Others hailed them as the innovators of the century, wondering if their bold ideas could spark a new age of technological collaboration. But amid all the buzz and excitement, Noah remained focused. He had seen firsthand the power of what they were building, and the potential to make a real, lasting impact on the world. The energy grid was no longer just an idea. It was a lifeline. And he knew that no matter the challenges they faced, they couldn't stop now. The world was watching. And it was up to them to prove that change was possible. For all the success and momentum that Noah and Elon had experienced, they both knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. They were venturing into uncharted territory, revolutionizing the energy sector, building an entirely new infrastructure, and tackling one of the world's most pressing crises. It was an undertaking that could change the course of history, but it also meant they would face hurdles that no amount of preparation could have fully anticipated. It began in the early weeks of their pilot projects. The first large-scale installations of their renewable energy grids had been deployed in select regions, and initially, things seemed to be running smoothly. The energy output was consistent, the grid performed well under various conditions, and the feedback from the local governments was overwhelmingly positive. But as the system scaled, so did the problems. One of the first signs of trouble came when the energy storage system, a critical component of their grid, began to experience issues. While the technology had been reliable in initial tests, when it was put to use on a larger scale, some of the batteries were failing to hold their charge for as long as expected. This was problematic. Without efficient storage, the entire system would be unreliable, and the promise of 24/7 sustainable energy would remain just that, a promise. Noah was the first to hear about the issue. Late one night, he received a frantic call from one of the engineers on the project. "We've got a serious problem," the engineer said, voice tense. "The new energy storage units aren't performing up to spec. In some areas, they're failing completely. We're not sure what's going wrong yet, but we're seeing a significant drop in capacity. If this doesn't get fixed, we'll have to pull the plug on the whole project." Noah felt his heart race. They had worked so hard to get to this point, and now, in the blink of an eye, it seemed like everything might come crashing down. He immediately called Elon, waking him up in the middle of the night, knowing this was a situation that would require their combined expertise. Within hours, both of them were at the research facility, where a team of engineers and scientists were already at work trying to diagnose the problem. Elon, who had always prided himself on solving problems under pressure, walked through the lab with a focused intensity. His mind was working faster than anyone could keep up, sifting through potential causes and solutions. "Let's tear this down," he said as he examined one of the malfunctioning batteries. "If we have to rebuild it from the ground up, then so be it. We're not letting this be the thing that stops us." But as the hours ticked by and they worked tirelessly to address the issue, Noah couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had never encountered a setback of this magnitude before. He was no longer just the 10-year-old genius, he was part of a global team that depended on him to find a solution. The pressure was suffocating, and the doubt started creeping in. What if they couldn't fix it? What if all of this, the technology, the dream, the future of renewable energy, was doomed to fail? Elon noticed Noah's unease as he stared at a computer screen, running through calculations that seemed to lead nowhere. "Noah," Elon said softly, pulling him away from the screen. "We've been through worse. You've been through worse. You're not alone in this." Noah looked up at Elon, meeting his eyes for the first time that day. For the first time in months, he felt like a kid again, a kid who had no idea how to fix a problem, but who had been given the chance to try anyway. The uncertainty he was feeling was overwhelming, but Elon's calm, collected demeanor reminded him of the bigger picture. They hadn't come this far to quit now. "I know," Noah replied quietly. "But what if this is the thing we can't fix? What if we've reached our limit?" Elon smiled, putting a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Then we'll find another way. We always do. There's no limit. Not for us." With that reassurance, Noah threw himself back into the problem. It took several more days of relentless work, sleepless nights, and countless iterations of testing, but eventually, they found the issue. It wasn't the technology itself, it was a flaw in one of the components that had been manufactured incorrectly. A simple oversight in the supply chain had caused a chain reaction that led to the failures they were seeing. It was a setback, but it wasn't the end. Noah felt a rush of relief as they fixed the flaw and tested the system again. This time, it worked. The energy storage system performed as expected, and the grid was stable once more. "Looks like we're back on track," Elon said with a grin, though his eyes betrayed a hint of exhaustion. Noah, too, felt a weight lift off his shoulders. They had done it. They had faced the challenge head-on and overcome it together. But even as he celebrated the small victory, he knew that this wouldn't be the last obstacle they would face. The real challenge was just beginning. As the project continued to scale, so did the difficulties. Political resistance in some countries grew as local energy companies and governments struggled to adapt to the idea of renewable energy replacing their established systems. There were rumors of sabotage, and Noah found himself facing attacks not just from competitors, but from people who believed the rapid shift to renewable energy was too disruptive. In the midst of these challenges, Elon and Noah's partnership began to grow even more crucial. Where Elon had always been the visionary, the one with the grand ideas and unshakable confidence, Noah was proving to be the pragmatic force, the one who saw the smallest details and found creative solutions in the face of adversity. Together, they made a formidable team. But with the challenges also came the realization that the road to global change was never going to be smooth. It was going to be a fight, a battle that required persistence, resilience, and an unwavering belief in their vision. As they navigated through one setback after another, Noah couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And no matter how difficult the road ahead was, he was ready for it. Because, in the end, it wasn't just about the technology. It was about changing the world. And that was a mission worth fighting for. The setbacks had only made them more determined. What began as a small-scale project to revolutionize the world's energy systems had now blossomed into a global movement, attracting attention from every corner of the planet. But with the attention came resistance. People, companies, and entire governments who had vested interests in the existing energy systems were starting to push back. The system Noah and Elon had built wasn't just an innovation, it was a direct threat to the status quo. Noah and Elon knew that this was coming, but the intensity of the pushback still caught them off guard. What surprised Noah most wasn't the corporate sabotage or the political lobbying against their project, it was the personal attacks. Suddenly, Noah's age became a point of ridicule. Despite the groundbreaking success of their pilot projects and the growing list of countries interested in adopting their grid, critics couldn't seem to move past the idea of a 10-year-old taking on something so vast. It was as if, for some, his age alone was enough to discredit everything they had achieved. On a chilly morning in late October, Noah sat in the conference room of their headquarters, reading through the latest media coverage. The headlines were relentless. Child genius promises global energy change, is it just a pipe dream, and the dangers of letting a kid lead the future of energy. He felt his stomach twist as he scrolled through the articles. It wasn't just the attacks on him that stung, it was the insinuation that their work was naive, impossible, and unworthy of attention. Kid genius, he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. It's not even about that. It's about the technology. It's about what we can do for the world. Elon, who had entered the room while Noah was reading, glanced over at the articles and let out a long sigh. You know, this is all part of the game. People don't like change, especially when it threatens the powers that be. Noah looked up at him. But it's not just that. They're calling it a gimmick, like we're trying to sell some kind of fantasy. Don't they see the impact it could have? I know, Elon said, his voice hard. But that's the thing with revolution. It's always met with resistance. The people we're up against don't just control money and power, they control narratives. They'll do anything to protect what they have. Noah felt the weight of Elon's words. There was truth in them. The world they were trying to change was built on years of entrenched systems. The fossil fuel industry had billions of dollars invested in the status quo, and they weren't about to let two innovators, one of them a 10-year-old, disrupt their entire business model. As the negative press grew louder, so did the political opposition. In one particularly dramatic incident, a high-ranking government official in the United States publicly questioned the safety and practicality of Noah and Elon's energy grid. This is not the kind of technology we can risk putting in the hands of children, the official said in an interview, the words dripping with condescension. It wasn't long before other countries followed suit, either dismissing the technology outright or stalling negotiations. In India, for example, the government initially showed interest in adopting the grid for rural areas, but after a series of tense negotiations, they withdrew their support, citing concerns over cost and reliability. Meanwhile, oil and gas companies began lobbying harder than ever, using their financial influence to sway politicians, spreading misinformation about the dangers of renewable energy. Despite the mounting pressure, Noah and Elon refused to back down. They had been through too much to give up now. They knew that their technology worked. It wasn't a question of feasibility. It was about overcoming the barrier of perception. It was about showing the world that renewable energy wasn't just a nice-to-have, it was a necessity. Determined to push forward, they decided to take a more direct approach. Noah and Elon began traveling to countries where the resistance was strongest, confronting the critics face-to-face, and trying to change minds. One of the most memorable moments came when they were invited to speak at an international conference in Dubai, where some of the world's largest energy companies had gathered. Elon had a plan. Instead of sitting through another round of corporate presentations and panel discussions, he and Noah decided to disrupt the event. The night before their scheduled speech, they announced a surprise live demonstration of the energy grid, something no one had seen on this scale before. It was a gamble, but they knew it was their best shot at turning the tide. The next morning, the conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Industry leaders and media personnel from across the globe crowded into the auditorium, murmuring about the upcoming presentation. Most were skeptical, some were even outright hostile. But as the stage lights dimmed and the curtain rose, all doubts were suspended. The demonstration began with a massive, holographic map of the world projected across the auditorium. On it, regions of the globe flickered with dynamic data, showing the effects of using the renewable energy grid in real time. As Noah and Elon walked onto the stage, the entire audience fell silent. This, Elon began, is the future. This is the energy of tomorrow, today. Noah stood beside him, his face calm but resolute. He pointed to the map. What you see here is not just a blueprint. It's a system that works. And it's ready to go global. No gimmicks, no shortcuts, just proven technology that will change the world. The demonstration continued for nearly an hour, with data streams showing the energy grid's efficiency, how it adapted to different geographic and environmental conditions, and how quickly it could be scaled. Then, they revealed the most shocking part of all, a live connection to one of their existing energy grids, a test site in rural Africa, where the system had been running smoothly for months. The audience watched, stunned, as the system flawlessly powered homes, businesses, and schools in real time. As the demonstration concluded, the room erupted into applause. For the first time, the skeptics were forced to confront the reality of the technology. It wasn't a child's dream, it was a working, sustainable solution. And they had seen it with their own eyes. But the victory in Dubai was just one battle won in a much larger war. The political opposition didn't disappear overnight, nor did the media backlash. Still, the demonstration had made an undeniable impact. Suddenly, the tide was turning in their favor. More and more countries began to reconsider their stance, and even the most hardened critics started reaching out for talks. The pushback had been fierce, but Noah and Elon had proven they could rise above it. They had not only shown that their technology worked, they had shown the world the power of persistence, innovation, and the courage to face adversity head-on. But as they celebrated their success, they both knew this was only the beginning. The real work, spreading the technology on a global scale, was just getting started. And with every victory came new challenges. But if there was one thing Noah and Elon had learned from their journey so far, it was this: change was hard. But nothing worth doing was ever easy. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Do you think Noah and Elon will continue to overcome the opposition and bring their vision to life? What's your take on the power of perseverance in the face of adversity? Let us know your thoughts below. After the success of the Dubai demonstration, Noah and Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. They knew they were on the verge of something monumental, but they also understood that breaking through the wall of resistance was only the beginning. The global stage was now watching, and they had to be prepared for the relentless pressure that would follow. Noah's mind was racing. The realization that they had the potential to actually change the world was both exhilarating and overwhelming. It was hard for him to wrap his head around the fact that a few months ago, he had just been a kid with an idea, and now, he was on the verge of helping reshape the global energy system. But this feeling of triumph was soon tempered by a sense of responsibility. People's lives and futures were riding on the success of this project. The weight of the mission was heavier than he had ever felt before. Elon, on the other hand, had a quiet confidence. He was no stranger to high-stakes ventures. Over the years, he had faced criticism, skepticism, and personal attacks with relentless determination. He'd been here before, battling against those who told him his ideas were impossible. And in the end, he always proved them wrong. But even he knew this was different. The scale of this project, the global ramifications, it was bigger than anything he had ever done. And the resistance they were facing was unlike anything he had encountered in the past. But there was no turning back now. The stakes had become too high. The world was watching, and they had a job to do. A few weeks after the Dubai demonstration, the pair traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with key policymakers. The United States was a critical piece of the puzzle. If they couldn't gain the support of the American government, their plans for global energy change would be severely delayed. And the opposition was fierce. Industry leaders, lobbyists, and political figures aligned with the fossil fuel industry were working overtime to keep the status quo intact. It was the day of the big meeting, and the tension was palpable. Noah and Elon walked into the Senate office building, where a group of senators and energy executives had gathered. The meeting room was large, with a long, polished wooden table surrounded by high-backed chairs. At one end of the table sat Senator Hillman, a veteran politician known for his pro-fossil fuel stance. Beside him sat representatives from major oil companies, who wore expressions of skepticism and disdain. On the other side of the table, Noah and Elon took their seats, ready for the conversation to unfold. Senator Hillman spoke first. "Gentlemen, we're all aware of the so-called green revolution you're pushing. But we need to be clear about one thing: this isn't just about technology. It's about jobs. It's about our economy. The oil and gas industry is the backbone of this nation. And we're not about to let a couple of dreamers with a shiny new idea put that at risk. Elon leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. Senator, with all due respect, this isn't about putting anyone at risk. This is about creating a new economy, one that doesn't rely on polluting fossil fuels but on clean, sustainable energy. It's about securing the future, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. And we have the technology to make that future a reality. Noah, sitting quietly beside Elon, had been listening closely. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. This was his chance to show them that they were wrong, not just about the technology, but about the potential of a 10-year-old to contribute to something so vast. With a deep breath, he spoke. I know you're worried about jobs, Noah began, his voice clear and confident. But what if I told you that we can create millions of new jobs in renewable energy? We can build factories to produce the solar panels and wind turbines. We can create jobs in the installation, maintenance, and research sectors. This isn't about taking away jobs, it's about creating better ones. The room fell silent for a moment. Senator Hillman's face twitched with frustration, but he didn't interrupt. He was used to dismissing ideas from younger generations, but Noah's words had caught him off guard. You're just a kid, Hillman said dismissively, though the edge in his voice betrayed a hint of unease. What do you know about jobs and the economy? Noah didn't flinch. I may be young, but I know one thing for sure, we can't keep going down the same path. If we don't change now, we'll be left with nothing but a planet that's too damaged to fix. And that will affect everyone, regardless of what industry you work in. Elon looked over at Noah, proud of how he was handling the pressure. The kid had a point. Noah wasn't just speaking from a place of intelligence, he was speaking from a place of heart. He was fighting for the future of the world, and there was no way anyone could argue with that. The room was still, and for the first time that day, the opposing side looked uncertain. Senator Hillman glanced at his colleagues, then back at Noah and Elon. The skepticism hadn't disappeared, but something had shifted. The people in the room had heard the truth, the undeniable, irrefutable truth, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. As the meeting ended, Noah and Elon didn't walk out with an immediate victory. The senators had agreed to a follow-up meeting, but the road ahead was still rocky. However, the seed had been planted. Senator Hillman had a lot of influence, and the fact that Noah and Elon had planted doubts in his mind was a victory in itself. It was a small step, but it was progress. Over the next few months, the momentum continued to build. More countries expressed interest in the renewable energy grids, and more businesses began to come on board. Noah and Elon had shown the world that they were capable of facing the fiercest opposition and emerging victorious. But as they moved forward, they both knew that the real battle was only just beginning. There would be more meetings, more confrontations, and more attempts to sabotage their efforts. But Noah and Elon were ready for it. They had faced setbacks before, and they would face many more. But they also knew this, the world was changing, and they were the ones leading the charge. And nothing, not the critics, not the media, not the powerful forces working against them, could stop them. After months of hard work, long nights, and relentless pressure, Noah and Elon could feel the momentum starting to shift. It wasn't just the major governments who were beginning to pay attention, it was ordinary people, activists, and businesses all over the world. People were starting to see that their energy grid wasn't just a dream, it was real, and it was ready. The question now wasn't whether it could work, it was whether the world was ready to embrace it. The tipping point came on a cold winter evening, just as the team was preparing for another round of high-stakes negotiations. Elon and Noah sat in their office, surrounded by blueprints and data projections. The room was quiet, save for the hum of computers and the sound of pages turning. Noah stared at the screen in front of him, deep in thought. Despite the progress they had made, a part of him couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were on the brink of something much larger. The kind of shift that would change the world, forever. Noah, we're on the edge of a breakthrough, Elon said, leaning back in his chair. The resistance is real, but look at the signs. More countries are coming to the table, more businesses are investing in clean energy. This is it. This is the moment. Noah nodded, his eyes still glued to the screen. But we need more. We need something to push it over the edge. It's not enough just to be right, we need the world to see that too. Agreed, Elon replied. But what we need now is critical mass. We need enough momentum to create a snowball effect. If we can get just a few more key players on board, the rest will follow. And then, just like that, it happened. The news broke late one evening. A major coalition of global corporations, led by some of the largest tech companies in the world, had come together to pledge support for Noah and Elon's renewable energy grid. It wasn't just an endorsement, it was a full-scale partnership. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and Apple were committing to transition their global operations to renewable energy, with the energy grid at the core of their plans. It was a game changer. The moment the announcement went live, social media exploded. The media buzzed with headlines like, "Tech giants join forces to support groundbreaking energy revolution," and "Global business leaders bet on renewable future." Investors started pouring in, eager to get a piece of the future, and major government bodies, including the European Union, suddenly accelerated their negotiations with Noah and Elon's team. Noah felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the tipping point they had been waiting for. The world was suddenly paying attention, and more importantly, they were taking action. The criticism, the resistance, the doubts, it was all fading in the wake of this massive shift. But even as the world began to embrace the change, the challenges weren't over. The real work of scaling the grid, of getting it into every country, every home, every business, was just beginning. The pressure to deliver had never been higher. A few days later, Noah and Elon sat down for a special broadcast that would be aired globally. They were being interviewed by one of the most respected journalists in the world, Maria Santiago, for an exclusive segment on the energy revolution. It was a high-stakes moment. This was their chance to talk directly to millions of people and solidify their vision for the future. Maria, sitting across from them in a sleek, modern studio, looked directly at Noah. "You've just seen your vision gain unprecedented support, but you're still facing a monumental task ahead. What's next for you both? What happens after this tipping point?" Noah's heart raced as he prepared to speak, but as he glanced over at Elon, he felt the weight of the moment settle in. Elon gave him a small nod, signaling that it was his turn to answer. Noah cleared his throat. "What's next is simple. We keep going. We work harder. We scale faster. We bring this technology to the people who need it most, the ones who've been left behind by traditional energy systems. We know this won't happen overnight, but every step forward is one step closer to a future where energy is no longer a commodity but a right. And that future is now." Maria smiled, clearly impressed. "And Elon, what do you say to the skeptics who still doubt the viability of this project? The ones who think this is just another pipe dream?" Elon's expression was calm, almost serene. "To them, I'd say, look at the progress. Look at what we've already achieved. We've moved beyond talking about change. We're making it happen. The world is waking up, and those who resist will eventually be left behind." The broadcast aired that evening, and by the next morning, the impact was felt across the globe. The energy grid wasn't just a piece of technology anymore, it was a movement, one that people from all walks of life were embracing. It wasn't just about renewable energy, it was about creating a new, more equitable world. It was about fighting for the planet and for the future, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world was ready to make that change. With the massive support from global corporations, governments, and the growing grassroots movement, it became clear that Noah and Elon were no longer just pioneers in the field of technology. They had become symbols of a new era, a time when innovation, persistence, and a deep belief in the possibility of a better world could overcome any challenge. But even as they stood at the precipice of this revolution, they knew the fight wasn't over. There would be more hurdles, more obstacles, and more battles to fight. The energy grid was ready to change the world, but only if they could keep the momentum alive. Noah and Elon had learned a valuable lesson over the past months, that change, real change, takes time. It takes patience, resilience, and, most of all, a commitment to pushing forward, even when the world tells you it can't be done. As they looked toward the future, they knew they weren't just changing the way the world consumed energy. They were changing the way people thought about what was possible. And that was something far more powerful than any technology could ever be. As the global energy revolution gained momentum, Noah and Elon found themselves at the center of a whirlwind. The press, the policymakers, the corporations, they all wanted a piece of the action. What had started as a small, radical idea in a laboratory was now a beacon for change. The world was watching, and Noah knew the stakes had never been higher. In the weeks following the announcement of the corporate coalition, Noah and Elon received countless invitations for interviews, conferences, and summits. People wanted to hear from the minds behind the energy grid that could reshape the planet's future. Every conversation they had seemed to draw more and more attention, and while Noah was thrilled by the widespread support, he was also starting to feel the weight of it all. Elon, as always, was the picture of calm. His years of experience had taught him to handle pressure with grace. He knew this was the moment they had been working toward for so long, but he also understood that the real test had only just begun. The world was excited, yes, but there were still barriers to break through, vested interests to challenge, and no one knew that better than Elon. The team had grown exponentially. It wasn't just engineers and scientists anymore. They had added experts in finance, government relations, and public affairs. A company that had once been a handful of passionate individuals was now an international powerhouse, ready to tackle one of the biggest challenges humanity had ever faced. But with this growth came new responsibilities. It was a brisk morning in early spring when Noah and Elon found themselves once again in Washington, D.C., preparing for what could be the most crucial meeting of their lives. The U.S. Senate had agreed to a hearing on the renewable energy grid, a hearing that could decide whether the United States would fully commit to supporting the global transition to clean energy. The stakes were higher than ever. If they could win over Congress, it would signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. was ready to take the lead in the energy revolution. As they entered the Senate hearing room, Noah was struck by the gravity of the situation. The room was filled with some of the most powerful people in the world, senators, lobbyists, executives, and journalists, all watching them with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Senator Hillman, the pro-fossil fuel stalwart they had met months earlier, sat at the front of the room, his face a mask of neutral professionalism. But Noah could see the underlying tension in his posture. The meeting began, and Noah felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment. His entire body was on high alert, but he reminded himself that they had done the hard work. Now, all they had to do was speak from the heart. Senator Hillman was the first to speak. "Gentlemen, it's clear that you've gained some traction, but you must understand the complexity of the situation. Energy is not just about technology, it's about the economy, jobs, national security. You can't expect to disrupt an industry that has been the backbone of our nation for over a century without consequences." Noah looked at the senator, then at Elon, who gave him a subtle nod. It was time to speak. "We're not here to disrupt for the sake of disruption," Noah began, his voice steady. "We're here to build a future that's sustainable. One where energy isn't a source of destruction but a source of life. The fossil fuel industry has served its purpose, but it's time for the world to evolve. And this transition isn't about taking jobs away, it's about creating new ones, better ones." The room was silent as Noah continued, each word carefully chosen. "We've shown that this energy grid works. We've already proven its potential. Now, we need the U.S. to lead, not follow. We need your support, not just for the future of energy, but for the future of every single person on this planet. Because if we don't make this change now, we risk losing everything." Senator Hillman raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by Noah's clarity and conviction. And how exactly do you plan to make this happen? You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to fall into place. Elon spoke up, his voice unwavering. Senator, we've already begun. The groundwork is being laid as we speak. But to truly scale this technology, we need the backing of governments and industries across the globe. We need a united effort. We need the US to be the leader it has always been, and we need to start that leadership here, in this room. The hearing continued for several hours, with Noah and Elon answering questions, addressing concerns, and, at times, deflecting outright opposition. But despite the pushback, there was something undeniable about the energy in the room. The world was changing, and whether the senators liked it or not, they couldn't deny the power of what Noah and Elon were presenting. As the meeting came to a close, Senator Hillman stood and addressed the room. This is not a decision that can be made lightly. But what I will say is this: your vision, your dedication, and your passion have made an impact today. We will take this seriously, and we will deliberate on the best path forward. For the first time in the meeting, Noah allowed himself to breathe a little easier. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was progress. Senator Hillman hadn't outright dismissed them. In fact, he had acknowledged their influence, which was more than they could have hoped for. The next few weeks were a blur of negotiations, press conferences, and global outreach. As Noah and Elon worked tirelessly to build partnerships, they also saw the growth of a global movement that was starting to gain serious traction. People from all over the world were embracing the energy grid, recognizing that the future of energy wasn't just a corporate or government initiative, it was a movement for the people. Noah's confidence grew with each passing day. The same doubts that had once plagued him were now replaced with the certainty that the world was ready for change. His dream was becoming a reality, and though the challenges were far from over, Noah felt like they were on the verge of something monumental. But even as the dream was within reach, Noah and Elon both knew that their journey was only just beginning. They had made incredible strides, but there were still battles to be fought, and they had to stay vigilant. The world was watching, and they had to lead with conviction, no matter what. The surge of global support for Noah and Elon's energy revolution had created an undeniable wave, but just as the momentum built to its peak, the first signs of resistance began to appear. It wasn't the typical opposition they had encountered before. Those were the governments who feared losing control or the environmental lobbyists who saw the grid as an economic threat. No, this time, the resistance came from an unexpected corner: the corporate giants who were deeply entrenched in the fossil fuel business. Noah had always known that the transition to a renewable future would come with its fair share of opposition, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of the pushback they were about to face. The energy grid wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was a threat to a multi-trillion-dollar industry, one that had been the backbone of the global economy for decades. It all started when a group of high-profile oil and gas executives, some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, began to publicly criticize the grid. Their tactics were sophisticated, using a combination of public relations campaigns and behind-the-scenes lobbying to sow doubt about the viability of Noah and Elon's vision. "They're calling us unrealistic, unstable," Noah said one evening, as he and Elon sat in the boardroom of their headquarters, reviewing the latest media reports. "They've got all their power and money, and they're using it to push back. The question is, how do we fight this?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he thought. "We fight with what we have: truth, data, and our track record. These corporations are using fear. They're afraid of change, afraid of losing their dominance. But the world is evolving, and no amount of money or influence can stop that." Noah nodded, but the weight of the situation was heavy. He understood that this wouldn't be an easy fight. The fossil fuel industry wasn't just powerful, it was entrenched. The public perception of oil and gas companies as stable, reliable, and even patriotic organizations would be difficult to shift. It wasn't just about energy anymore. It was about power. Control. The status quo. The first major public clash came in the form of a televised debate. A well-known CEO of a major oil company, Victor Callahan, agreed to sit down with Noah and Elon on a live broadcast. Callahan was a seasoned business leader, charismatic, intelligent, and ruthless when it came to defending his empire. The debate was scheduled for prime time, ensuring a massive audience. Noah had prepared for this moment for weeks, knowing that it would be their chance to not only defend the grid but to show the world that the energy revolution was not some utopian fantasy, it was a practical, achievable solution that had already begun to change lives. As the cameras rolled and the debate began, Victor Callahan wasted no time in launching his attack. "You're asking the world to abandon a system that's worked for centuries," Callahan said, his voice calm but firm. "You're asking us to give up what has been the foundation of our prosperity. And for what? A dream? A vision? These energy grids you propose, how do we know they will work in the real world? What happens when the sun doesn't shine, or the wind doesn't blow? What happens when the grid fails?" Noah felt the familiar weight of pressure bearing down on him, but he stayed calm, his voice measured. "You're right, Victor. Fossil fuels have been the foundation of the global economy. But that foundation is crumbling. The truth is that the world is changing, and the grid is more than just a dream, it's a reality. It's been tested, proven, and is already being implemented. The future isn't fossil fuels. The future is sustainable energy. And it's already here." Callahan raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. "That sounds like a nice fairy tale, Noah. But I'm not here to talk about fairy tales. We're talking about billions of dollars in infrastructure, jobs, and a system that people have depended on for generations. This isn't about idealism, it's about practicality." Elon leaned forward, cutting through the tension in the room with his sharp, calculated words. "Victor, practicality is about finding the solutions for tomorrow, not clinging to the broken systems of yesterday. The world doesn't wait for those who are stuck in the past." The debate raged on, but as the hours passed, it became clear that the public was beginning to see the bigger picture. The fossil fuel industry's arguments, though well-funded and deeply entrenched, started to look outdated in comparison to the vision that Noah and Elon were presenting. The technology was not just theoretical, it was here. And it was working. The days following the debate were a mix of highs and lows. The media coverage was intense. Some outlets praised Noah and Elon for their clarity and conviction, while others criticized them for being overly idealistic. But one thing became clear: the fossil fuel industry's hold on the public's imagination was weakening. People were starting to ask questions, to look for answers beyond the conventional narratives they had been fed for decades. Behind the scenes, the corporate resistance was intensifying. Noah received reports of attempts to derail their progress through more subtle means, spreading misinformation, applying pressure to politicians, and even attempting to sway public opinion with carefully crafted experts who spoke against the grid's feasibility. Noah and Elon were no strangers to this kind of fight. They had faced opposition before, in the form of doubters and naysayers, but this was different. The fossil fuel industry was playing for keeps, and they weren't going to let go without a fight. But even as the resistance grew louder, Noah and Elon could feel something else, a shift in the air. The world was beginning to see the truth. The grid wasn't just a technology. It was a movement. A movement that wasn't just about renewable energy, it was about the future of humanity itself. In the coming months, Noah and Elon would face even more battles, against corporate giants, against entrenched political interests, and against the growing force of climate change denial. But the one thing that kept them going was the knowledge that they were on the right side of history. And, more than anything, they knew they couldn't stop now. Not when the future was so close. As the world watched, Noah and Elon would soon realize that the real fight was only just beginning. The battle lines were drawn. The corporate giants had pushed back with everything they had: media campaigns, lobbying efforts, and underhanded tactics. But there was something that they hadn't anticipated: the groundswell of support from the global community, a movement that was quickly gaining momentum, driven by people who were no longer willing to settle for the old way of doing things. For Noah and Elon, this wasn't just a battle of technology versus tradition, it was a battle for the future. They were fighting not only for the energy grid but for the very soul of the planet. And while the road ahead was fraught with challenges, the spark they had ignited had already begun to burn brighter than anyone could have imagined. It was late at night when Noah sat in the now familiar conference room, staring at the glowing map on the wall. The energy grid had expanded across several continents, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. In the span of just a few months, more than 100 cities had signed on to the initiative, and the first wave of installations was already complete. Clean, renewable energy was no longer a pipe dream, it was a reality. Elon stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes focused on the map. "We're making history, Noah. There's no going back now." Noah nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, but his mind was far from content. He knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The grid had proven itself, there was no longer any question about its capabilities. But the corporate giants were still fighting tooth and nail to maintain their control over the energy sector. And they had deep pockets and influence that couldn't be easily ignored. "Yes, but we've got a long way to go," Noah said, his voice tinged with the weight of responsibility. "The next phase is crucial. We can't afford to be complacent now. Not with so much on the line." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind?" "We need a game changer. Something big enough to tip the scales in our favor," Noah replied. He paused, running a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "We need to show the world that this isn't just about energy, it's about economic transformation. We need to prove that investing in the grid isn't just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do." The next few days were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and late-night brainstorming. They knew that they needed more than just public support, they needed to push the narrative to the next level. It wasn't enough to say that renewable energy was the future, they had to prove it with hard data, undeniable facts, and results that spoke for themselves. And so, Elon and Noah decided to take the bold step of launching a global economic summit, the Renewable Future Summit. It would be a place where industry leaders, economists, and policy makers from around the world would gather to discuss the potential of the energy grid, not just as a technological breakthrough but as an economic catalyst. The goal was to demonstrate that the grid wasn't just an environmental initiative, it was a business opportunity of unprecedented scale. Noah knew it would be risky. They were essentially putting their entire vision on the line, hoping that the world's power brokers would see the potential for long-term growth and job creation. But the risks, he realized, were worth it. If they could make the economic case for the grid, the rest of the world would follow. The summit took place in the heart of London, one of the world's most influential cities, and the venue was nothing short of spectacular. As the day of the event drew closer, the media buzz grew louder. The world was watching, waiting to see whether Noah and Elon could convince the titans of industry that the future was now. When the doors to the summit finally opened, a wave of anticipation flooded the room. Leaders from every corner of the globe were present, CEOs from major tech companies, financiers from Wall Street, and ministers from nations grappling with the impact of climate change. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the energy of possibility. Elon took the stage first. His presence was commanding, his confidence unshakable. He spoke not just about the technical achievements of the energy grid but about the broader economic implications. He explained how the grid could create millions of new jobs, revitalizing economies, reducing inequality, and giving rise to a new wave of technological innovation. Renewable energy isn't just about saving the planet, Elon said, his voice steady and clear. It's about creating a new future. A future where every person, every community, has access to clean, affordable power. A future where innovation drives growth, not stagnation. And that future starts today. Noah followed, his approach more measured but no less powerful. He highlighted the data, how countries that had already adopted the grid were seeing economic booms, new industries, and a sharp reduction in energy costs. He shared stories of communities that had once been reliant on expensive and polluting energy sources now thriving with renewable power. He spoke of a future where the energy grid didn't just serve the rich but empowered the marginalized and the underserved. For too long, energy has been controlled by a few. But energy belongs to everyone. It's time to rewrite the rules, Noah said, his voice rising with conviction. This is about giving power back to the people, power to transform their lives, power to change their futures. The summit was a resounding success. The media coverage was overwhelming, and the global business community began to shift its perspective. What had once been seen as a risky, unproven initiative was now being hailed as the next big economic opportunity. Investors, who had once been hesitant to back such a bold vision, began pouring capital into the renewable grid. Companies that had been wary of the transition to renewable energy started seeing the value in making the switch. Governments, once resistant to change, began to move toward policy frameworks that supported the grid. The momentum was undeniable. The tide had turned. Back in the office, Noah and Elon were both exhausted but exhilarated. They had done it. They had moved beyond the point of no return. The world had taken notice, and the energy revolution was officially underway. Noah leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. "We've done it, Elon. But this is only the beginning. We've got the world's attention now. We have to keep pushing forward, no matter what." Elon smiled, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of what was to come. "The real work starts now. We've just opened the door. It's up to us to walk through it." The battle for the future was far from over. The fossil fuel giants were not going to go down without a fight, and the political landscape was still uncertain. But Noah and Elon knew one thing for sure: they had ignited a movement. And no matter how hard the opposition pushed back, they were ready for whatever came next. The exhilarating success of the Renewable Future Summit had propelled Noah and Elon to new heights. Their vision for a cleaner, more equitable world was now front and center in the global conversation. Investors, governments, and tech moguls were eager to jump on board, creating a wave of optimism that seemed unstoppable. But as with all success stories, shadows lurked just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It all started with an anonymous email. Noah had received it late one evening, just as he was preparing to call it a night. The subject line was cryptic: "The real cost of your grid." At first, he assumed it was just another piece of anti-renewable rhetoric. There had been plenty of that over the years, but something about the sender's information caught his eye. The email was detailed. It contained reports from several high-profile energy companies, along with confidential financial documents. The documents suggested that certain powerful players were actively attempting to undermine the grid through a series of covert maneuvers. Among the data was a trail of suspicious financial transactions, likely orchestrated by one of the world's largest oil conglomerates, Reynolds Energy. "Elon, you need to see this," Noah said, his voice low and serious as he called his partner into the room. Elon glanced at the screen, scanning the contents quickly. His face hardened. "This looks like an organized campaign to sabotage us. They're going after our investors, trying to destabilize the grid's value before it even has a chance to succeed." Noah clenched his fists. "We knew the opposition would get dirty, but I didn't expect them to play this game. They're trying to choke us out before we can build any momentum." Days later, the sabotage escalated. Anonymous smear campaigns appeared across social media, targeting the integrity of the energy grid. News outlets ran questionable stories claiming that the grid systems were untested and unreliable, painting a picture of a massive financial failure in the making. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental, just as they were launching new installations in several major cities. Despite their efforts to respond with the truth, the damage was done. Some investors hesitated. Government leaders who had once been eager to back the project now started to second-guess their involvement. Even some of the world's leading technology companies, who had pledged to support the grid, began pulling back, citing potential risks due to the growing backlash. "We're losing ground," Noah said, pacing in front of Elon's desk. "This isn't just some accident. Someone is orchestrating this, and we need to find out who." Elon's eyes narrowed as he looked at the documents on Noah's desk. "If Reynolds Energy is behind this, it's worse than we thought. They've got the resources to play this game on a global scale. But we've got something they don't have, our supporters. We need to rally them." Noah and Elon decided to confront the issue head-on. They knew they couldn't just play defense, they had to go on the offensive. They put together a team of cybersecurity experts, PR specialists, and financial analysts to investigate the situation further. But they also knew they needed to rally the public and demonstrate that the energy revolution was still very much alive. The next step was bold, a live-streamed global town hall event. It was a risky move, everything was on the line. But Noah and Elon knew that if they could stand in front of the world and explain the truth, they could regain control of the narrative. They needed to prove that the grid wasn't just a vision, it was the future. And nothing would stop them from seeing it through. The night of the town hall, the atmosphere was electric. Noah and Elon stood side by side at a large podium, facing a sea of cameras and millions of viewers across the globe. The room was packed with energy leaders, government officials, and key influencers who had supported the grid from the beginning. But the real audience was everyone watching from home. Noah opened the session, his voice steady but urgent. "We've been facing some challenges. Some of them are expected, change never comes without resistance. But others are orchestrated, deliberate attempts to derail the future we've worked so hard to build. And tonight, we're here to say that we will not back down." The crowd erupted in applause. Elon smiled and took over. "We've already shown the world what the grid can do. We've already seen it power cities, lower energy costs, and create jobs. What we are facing now isn't just about technology or energy. It's about greed. It's about a small group of powerful companies who are afraid of losing their control. But they cannot stop progress. They will not stop us." Noah continued, his tone rising with conviction. "This is bigger than the energy grid. It's about creating a future where power is in the hands of people, where communities, not corporations, are the ones in charge. We stand for a future where the planet thrives, where inequality is reduced, and where every person has access to clean, affordable energy. And we will not let anyone take that away from us." The town hall was a turning point. The transparency, the directness, and the strength of their resolve struck a chord with people around the world. Social media lit up with support, and within hours, the hashtag #PowerToThePeople was trending globally. Messages of solidarity flooded in, from environmental activists, tech leaders, and even political figures who had initially been on the fence. It was clear, Noah and Elon had reignited the flame of hope, and it was spreading faster than ever. But the fight wasn't over. The next morning, as Noah sat in his office, his phone buzzed with a new notification. It was from a trusted source within the energy industry. "They've gone nuclear," the message read. "Reynolds Energy is pulling out all the stops. The next phase is coming. Get ready." Noah's heart sank. This wasn't over. The real war was about to begin. The world had watched as Noah and Elon defied the odds and pushed forward with the renewable energy grid. The town hall had been a resounding success, and their message had reverberated across the globe. It was a pivotal moment, a declaration of intent that they were in this fight for the long haul. But the forces they were up against were not easily deterred. The next phase of the battle was about to get even more intense. 2 days after the town hall, the phone call came. Noah stared at the caller ID. It was from their internal cybersecurity team. His heart skipped a beat, something was wrong. The team's leader, Sarah, had always been efficient, but the urgency in her voice was palpable. "Talk to me," Noah answered the phone quickly. "We've detected something big," Sarah replied, her voice tight with concern. "Reynolds Energy has launched a full-scale cyber attack. They've breached multiple layers of our security and have gained access to sensitive data. It's more than just corporate espionage. They're looking to destroy our credibility before we can go any further. Noah's stomach churned. How bad is it? We're still assessing the full scope, but they've planted false data in our systems, including fabricated financial reports that suggest our grid is already collapsing under pressure, Sarah continued. They're about to leak it to the media. This isn't just about energy, it's about taking us down, about destroying everything we've worked for. Noah's mind raced. They had prepared for resistance, but this was different. They had always known that Reynolds Energy would fight back, but this kind of aggressive, underhanded attack was a new level of corporate warfare. And yet, there was something in his gut that told him this wasn't just about money, it was about fear. Fear of a future where the old ways were gone, where their power was no longer absolute. Sarah, do whatever it takes to contain it. And keep us updated, Noah said, his voice sharp. We can't afford to let this spiral. Not now. Noah hung up the phone, his mind spinning with the realization that the battle had escalated into something far darker than he had anticipated. But he knew one thing for sure, they couldn't back down. Not now, when they were so close to achieving the impossible. This wasn't just about technology, it was about changing the world. And if Reynolds Energy thought they could stop him, they were sorely mistaken. He walked over to the whiteboard in his office, where he had mapped out the next phase of their strategy. He drew a large circle in the center and wrote Energy Grid. Around it, he began to jot down the major players, investors, governments, businesses. And then he drew arrows connecting those players to the old power structures, corporations, oil magnates, and political figures who were benefiting from the status quo. Noah took a deep breath. The grid wasn't just a new energy system. It was a symbol, a beacon of hope for a world tired of being held hostage by a few powerful corporations. And Reynolds Energy, with its vast resources, was determined to stop that hope from spreading. Meanwhile, Elon was in his lab, working tirelessly on the next iteration of the grid's technology. The pressure was mounting, but there was an undeniable fire in his eyes. Despite the attacks, despite the mounting challenges, Elon was more determined than ever. This wasn't just a fight to innovate, it was a fight to secure the future of the planet. How's it looking? Noah asked, walking into the lab. Elon looked up from his workbench, his hands still moving over the intricate pieces of the new grid prototype. We're making progress. But with everything going on, I can't afford to take my eye off the ball. If Reynolds is trying to sabotage us, we need to make sure our tech stays ahead of them. We can't let them find a way to exploit any weaknesses. Noah nodded. I agree. But we also need to think bigger. We need to show the world that they can't control this. If we keep letting them pull the strings, we're never going to be free. The next day, Noah and Elon sat down for an emergency strategy session with their closest advisors. The team was small but incredibly sharp, a group of experts they had handpicked to help them fight this battle. They had one goal now, to outmaneuver Reynolds Energy before they could deal a fatal blow. We're playing on their turf right now, said Jack, one of their cybersecurity specialists. We've got to hit them where it hurts. We need to expose their tactics and make sure the world knows this is an attempt to undermine progress. But we need to be careful. They've got deep pockets, and they can pull all kinds of dirty tricks. I agree, Noah said, his jaw set with determination. We need to stay one step ahead. Let's gather evidence of the attack and find a way to prove that Reynolds Energy is behind it. We need a smoking gun. Elon, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. What if we don't just defend ourselves? What if we turn the tables? Noah raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? We've been playing on defense this whole time, Elon said, his voice growing stronger. What if we launch a counteroffensive? We expose their tactics and leverage our supporters in the media, governments, and financial institutions. Let's show the world that we're not afraid to stand up to them. Let's show them that we've got the power of the people behind us. The idea hung in the air for a moment, and then Noah's face broke into a grin. You're right. Let's do it. Let's take the fight to them. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The team worked around the clock, collecting evidence, coordinating with the media, and preparing a global counteroffensive. Noah and Elon knew that this wasn't just about protecting the grid, it was about protecting the future. And they were willing to risk everything to make sure it came to fruition. As they prepared to launch their counteroffensive, they realized one undeniable truth: the battle for the future was no longer just about technology. It was about ideology, about the right to a better world. And they weren't about to let a few powerful corporations control that future. The morning of the counteroffensive, Noah and Elon stood in front of the camera. It was time to expose the truth. They knew that this would be their defining moment, and they were ready to face the consequences. Noah and Elon stood at the podium, their eyes locked on the cameras. The studio was silent, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. It was time. They had prepared for this moment, but the stakes had never been higher. Today, they were not just defending the renewable energy grid, they were defending the future. Behind them, a large screen flickered to life. On it was a series of documents, carefully curated by their cybersecurity team. The world was about to see the true extent of Reynolds Energy's sabotage. They had gathered enough evidence to prove that the oil giant had been manipulating markets, orchestrating smear campaigns, and using underhanded tactics to destabilize the energy revolution Noah and Elon were trying to build. Noah took a deep breath and began, his voice calm but full of conviction. Today, we are standing at a crossroads. The future of energy is being decided right now, not in the boardrooms of giant corporations, but in the hands of everyday people. And we will not let a small group of elites control our destiny. The room was filled with reporters, energy industry leaders, and government officials who had been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Their eyes were glued to the screen, waiting for the evidence that would blow the lid off the scandal. Elon took the mic next. For months, we've been building a new kind of energy grid. A grid that doesn't depend on fossil fuels, that isn't controlled by a few powerful companies. We've made incredible progress, but not everyone is happy about that. Some companies are threatened by our vision of a future where clean, renewable energy powers the world. They want to keep us locked into the past, where oil and gas reign supreme. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Reynolds Energy is one of those companies. And today, we're showing you the lengths they've gone to in order to sabotage our efforts. With a click of a button, the screen behind them flashed with a series of confidential emails, financial documents, and communication logs. The evidence was irrefutable. The emails revealed direct communication between Reynolds Energy executives, plotting to manipulate public opinion and undermine the grid's credibility. The financial documents showed evidence of large-scale investments aimed at destabilizing the grid's funding. And the communication logs detailed how Reynolds Energy had infiltrated media outlets to spread false information about the grid's capabilities. Noah continued, his voice now rising with the intensity of the moment. This is not just about business rivalry. This is about a system that is so entrenched in power, it will go to any lengths to preserve its monopoly. We are here to expose the truth, and to tell you that we will not back down. The room was silent for a moment, the implications of what they were seeing sinking in. Then, the questions began. How did you acquire this information? One reporter asked, her voice sharp with skepticism. We have a team of experts working around the clock to ensure that our data is secure and that our integrity is preserved, Elon replied confidently. This is the result of months of investigation, working with trusted sources within the energy industry and the media. Another reporter fired off a question. How can we trust that this is not an attack from your side, a way to shift the focus away from your own problems? Noah stepped forward, his expression hardening. Because we have nothing to hide. The truth is clear. And the only way to fight back is to make sure the world sees it for what it is. The questions kept coming, but Noah and Elon held their ground, answering each one with unwavering certainty. The evidence was damning, and there was no denying the corruption behind Reynolds Energy's actions. The public now had the proof they needed, and the pressure on the energy giant was building. As the press conference came to a close, Noah and Elon walked off the stage, their hearts pounding. They had just exposed a conspiracy that could change the course of the energy industry forever. But they knew that this was only the beginning. Reynolds Energy wouldn't go down without a fight, and they would likely retaliate in ways they couldn't predict. That evening, as Noah sat in his office, the weight of the day's events hit him. The exposure of Reynolds Energy's corruption had been a massive victory, but the battle was far from over. The company had immense power, and they would not go quietly into the night. Elon walked in, his face as determined as ever. "They won't take this lying down. We've just made things much harder for ourselves." Noah nodded. "I know. But we've also made it clear that we won't be intimidated. And that's the most important part of this fight. If we show the world that we're not afraid to stand up to these giants, then maybe, just maybe, they'll start to see the truth." Elon looked at Noah, his gaze steely. "They've got deep pockets, but we've got something they don't. We've got the people on our side. And that's more powerful than any amount of money." Noah smiled, a hint of hope creeping into his chest. "Right. We'll keep pushing forward. We're not just fighting for a cleaner future. We're fighting for the right to choose our future." As the days passed, the ripple effect of the press conference began to take hold. Media outlets, once hesitant to report on the grid's potential, were now picking up the story. Articles were being written, TV segments were airing, and social media exploded with support for the renewable energy revolution. People from all walks of life were rallying behind the cause, and Reynolds Energy's stock began to fall as their shady dealings came to light. But even as momentum shifted in their favor, Noah and Elon knew that Reynolds Energy wasn't going to sit back and let the world turn against them. The corporate giant had deep pockets and plenty of influence. They would likely retaliate with everything they had. And Noah and Elon needed to be ready for whatever came next. The victory from the press conference was short-lived. The world had watched as Noah and Elon exposed the underhanded tactics of Reynolds Energy, but the battle was far from over. Despite their efforts to shine a light on the corruption, Reynolds Energy was not going down without a fight. They had a sprawling empire of influence, media connections, financial power, and political clout. The next phase of the war would be brutal. Noah sat at his desk, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a heavy cloud. He had expected backlash, but nothing like this. Over the past few days, Reynolds had begun to retaliate in ways that were more sophisticated and more dangerous than he could have imagined. "Where are we on the cyber front?" Noah asked, looking at Sarah, who had been tirelessly working to protect their systems. "We've managed to fend off their latest attack, but they're getting smarter," Sarah replied, her voice strained. "They've started targeting our investors, spreading rumors and disinformation about our viability. There's been a coordinated effort to drive potential backers away, and it's working. Our funding is beginning to dry up." Noah leaned back in his chair, trying to stay calm. "So, we're losing support?" "Not yet," Sarah responded. "But if this continues, we might have a problem. They've targeted some of our largest donors with fake reports showing that our grid is on the verge of collapse. It's all lies, but people are starting to believe them." Elon walked into the room just then, his face set with determination. "They're playing dirty, and they're getting away with it. But we can't afford to fold. We need to turn the tables on them." Noah looked up at Elon, his mind racing. "What do you have in mind?" Elon didn't waste a second. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Not just in the media. Not just with investors. We need to make their customers, our potential customers, see who they really are. If we want to win, we need to expose the depths of their corruption in a way that will leave them no room to hide." The plan was set in motion the next day. It wasn't just about the grid anymore, it was about a full-scale campaign to dismantle Reynolds Energy's carefully constructed image. Noah and Elon knew that the key to their success lay in transparency and truth. Reynolds had been trying to manipulate the market with lies, so it was time to turn the tables. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to gather more evidence, combing through Reynolds Energy's financial records, internal communications, and connections with corrupt politicians. They uncovered more dirt than they could have imagined: massive political donations to fund smear campaigns, illegal lobbying to block renewable energy initiatives, and even bribing local officials to keep their competitors out of the market. The new evidence was explosive. And Noah and Elon had a plan to make sure the world saw it. "We're not just going to sit back and wait for them to fall apart," Noah said, his voice unwavering. "We're going to force them into the light. We'll make sure every person who's been deceived sees the truth. This isn't just about winning a battle, it's about changing the course of history." That afternoon, Noah, Elon, and their team gathered in the war room, a conference room outfitted with multiple screens. They were ready for the next phase of their plan. The operation was simple yet bold: a global broadcast, an open letter to the world, and a direct appeal to the people who mattered most, the consumers. Noah and Elon knew that they couldn't fight this battle in the boardrooms alone. They needed to take it to the streets, to the people, and to the hearts and minds of those who could help them rise above the forces of corporate corruption. "We'll broadcast this live," Elon said, his voice cool as always, but there was an edge of determination in his words. "And we'll make sure we show the evidence. The media won't be able to ignore this. They'll have no choice but to cover it." Noah nodded. "We'll invite investors, environmentalists, tech entrepreneurs, everyone who has a stake in a clean, sustainable future. We'll let them see the truth for themselves." The live broadcast was scheduled for the following week. It would be streamed globally, with access to major media outlets and social media platforms. The moment they hit "go live," they would unleash their evidence in front of millions. Reynolds Energy would be forced to defend their empire in the court of public opinion. The morning of the broadcast arrived, and the studio was buzzing with activity. Noah, Elon, and the rest of the team had been preparing for this moment for days. They were ready to make their case to the world. The lights in the studio were bright, and the cameras were set up. In a way, it felt like they were preparing for a final showdown, their chance to expose Reynolds Energy and win the battle once and for all. Noah sat in front of the camera, his face serious and focused. "Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to share with you something that has been hidden from the public for far too long. We've worked tirelessly to build a new energy grid that will free the world from the shackles of fossil fuels, but what we've encountered along the way is something more dangerous: a system built on corruption, deception, and a refusal to let go of the past." Elon joined him on stage, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "We're not here to attack a company. We're here to attack a system that is holding back progress and stifling the potential of clean, renewable energy. What you're about to see will show you how deep this corruption runs. And it's time for the world to know the truth." With a click, the screen behind them lit up, showing the damning evidence they had gathered: leaked documents, emails, financial records, and covert recordings. The evidence was undeniable. Reynolds Energy had been manipulating the system at every level to keep their stranglehold on the market. As the broadcast continued, the reaction started to pour in. Social media exploded with outrage. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, and within hours, Reynolds Energy found itself on the defensive. Their stock prices plummeted, and the pressure was on. Hours after the broadcast, Noah and Elon sat in their war room, watching as the world reacted to the evidence. But there was a sense of calm in the room. They knew this was just the beginning. Reynolds Energy wouldn't go down without a fight. But they had just proven that the truth could not be silenced. The fight for the future was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Noah and Elon felt like they had a fighting chance. The last few weeks had been a blur of non-stop work, sleepless nights, and mounting pressure. Noah's renewable energy grid was on the verge of becoming the world's most transformative energy project, but as it neared completion, the cracks began to show. The grid, which was designed to tap into renewable energy from multiple sources, solar, wind, and geothermal, had been experiencing systemic failures in its integration. The AI algorithms that Noah had developed to manage the grid's power distribution were being overwhelmed by the complexity of the data. The system, which was supposed to be the future of global energy, was faltering under its own ambition. Noah paced back and forth in the dimly lit office, staring at the screens showing the system's real-time performance. Despite all their efforts, the grid kept stalling. Power fluctuations were wreaking havoc, and it seemed like every time they solved one problem, another bigger issue would arise. They were on the brink of collapse. "Elon, we've hit a wall," Noah said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "The grid's not ready. It's not going to work. We've done everything we can. If we can't get this fixed, we're done." Elon, who had been sitting at his desk, turned away from the monitors, his face grim. He had been silent for hours, lost in thought. It was clear that he was struggling with the weight of the situation. "This can't be happening," Elon muttered under his breath, staring at the ground, almost as if speaking to himself. This was supposed to change the world, this was supposed to be the solution. His voice cracked slightly, a rare show of vulnerability from a man who had faced so many challenges in his career. But this was different. This wasn't just about technology, it was about the future of the planet. Noah paused, taking in Elon's expression. He had seen Elon's bravado before, the unshakable confidence, the relentless pursuit of success. But this was a rare moment. A moment when even the great Elon Musk had doubts, when the weight of failure loomed large over him. "Elon," Noah began carefully, "I know you're scared. I am too. But we've come too far to quit now. We can't let it end like this." Elon's gaze flickered upward, his eyes filled with a kind of exhaustion and fear Noah had never seen before. "What if it doesn't work?" Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if we've put everything into this, and it's just not enough? I've led companies to success before, but this is bigger than anything I've ever done. What if we've overestimated our capabilities?" Noah stood still for a moment, watching the man he had come to admire, the visionary who had changed the world more than once, face his greatest fear, failure. Noah had never seen Elon like this. It was as if the very future of their mission was slipping through their fingers, and the impossible burden had finally caught up to him. For a moment, Noah considered offering a comforting word, something to placate Elon's fears. But that wouldn't be enough. He knew that what was needed wasn't just reassurance, it was a solution. A way forward. Noah took a deep breath, his mind racing through the problems they had encountered. And then, it hit him. He turned to Elon, his eyes wide with sudden realization. "I have an idea," Noah said, his voice steady with newfound certainty. "It's risky, but it's the only option we have left. What if we reframe the way the grid processes data? Right now, the AI is overwhelmed because it's trying to process everything in real time. But what if we distributed the load and created decentralized nodes to manage specific areas of the grid? Instead of one central system, we would have smaller, localized networks that communicate with each other. It might be the breakthrough we need to stabilize the grid." Elon's brow furrowed as he processed the idea. "Decentralized nodes," he repeated. "That could work. But the integration, it's going to be a logistical nightmare. It's not just about changing the software, it's about changing the entire architecture of the grid." "I know," Noah said. "But I think this is the only way we can handle the scale of the data without overwhelming the system. If we can break it down into smaller parts, each node can handle specific data sets, reducing the load on the central system. We can use AI to ensure they all work in sync." Elon stood up, his mind racing through the potential. For the first time in hours, a spark of hope flickered in his eyes. "It's bold," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "But if anyone can pull this off, it's us." Noah's idea had changed the course of their project. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it would require months of work to implement, but it was a way forward. And for the first time in a long time, both Noah and Elon believed they could still win. Months had passed since that pivotal moment. The decentralized approach that Noah had suggested had worked beyond their expectations. It was an unconventional solution, but it had breathed new life into their project. The grid was now stable, efficient, and, most importantly, ready to be deployed on a global scale. The public's interest in renewable energy had only grown stronger, and their company, powered by their new AI-driven energy grid, was becoming the world's leader in clean, sustainable power. Every test, every deployment of the new grid system, was met with success. The renewable energy revolution was no longer a distant dream, it was happening now. Noah, once a young and uncertain inventor, had matured into a confident leader. He had learned the value of thinking outside the box, the importance of staying resilient in the face of failure, and the power of collaboration. Where once he had been intimidated by Elon's experience and status, he now stood side by side with him as a true equal, both of them shaping the future of energy. Elon, too, had undergone a transformation. For the first time in his life, he had learned to embrace the perspective of someone younger, someone who saw the world not just with the eyes of an innovator, but with the eyes of someone who still had much to learn. Noah's bold ideas had forced him to look beyond his usual boundaries, and in doing so, he had found new humility. He had learned that sometimes, the best answers came from unexpected places, and that even he, with all his knowledge and experience, didn't have all the answers. Their company had become a beacon of hope, a symbol of the future. Governments and corporations around the world had taken notice, and partnerships were being forged at a rapid pace. Together, they were not just changing the way the world generated energy, they were changing the world itself. As they stood on the balcony of their new headquarters, looking out over a city powered entirely by their technology, Noah turned to Elon with a smile. "We did it." Elon smiled back, his eyes glinting with pride. "We did. But you were right, Noah. Without your vision, we never would have gotten here. This is just the beginning." Noah nodded, his mind already turning toward the future. There were still challenges ahead, new frontiers to explore, new technology to create, but for the first time, he felt ready for whatever came next. Together, they had created something that would shape the world for generations to come. And it was only just beginning. The dust had finally settled, but the aftermath of the battle was anything but calm. For months, Noah and Elon had fought tooth and nail against the mighty Reynolds Energy, but now, standing at the brink of victory, they were more uncertain than ever about what the future held. The last few days had been a whirlwind. Reynolds Energy, despite its immense power and resources, was crumbling under the weight of the evidence Noah and Elon had presented. Their stock had tanked, public trust was shattered, and government investigations had begun. But it was far from over. This was just the first step in a much larger movement, one that had the potential to shift the world's energy future forever. Noah sat in his office, staring out the window. The sky was an orange hue as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow on the horizon. He had always believed in the power of change, in the potential of technology to solve the world's greatest challenges. But now, after everything he had gone through, he understood more than ever how difficult it was to challenge an entire system that was so entrenched in power. Elon entered the room, his expression thoughtful. He took a seat next to Noah and looked out the window as well. "You know, I never thought it would be this hard," Elon said, his voice quieter than usual. "I always believed that once the world saw the truth, everything would fall into place. But the system fights back harder than we ever expected." Noah nodded, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "It's not just about the truth anymore, is it? It's about everything we've built. The grid. The future. The people who believed in us. If we don't push forward now, all of this could fall apart." The two men sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on everything they had achieved and everything they still had to do. They had exposed the corruption, yes. But they had also made enemies. Powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to reclaim their stranglehold on the world's energy market. The fight was far from over. The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity. Investigations into Reynolds Energy's actions were in full swing, and the media was abuzz with reports about the corruption that had been exposed. The public's outrage was palpable, and calls for accountability echoed across the globe. But Noah and Elon knew that the real work was just beginning. They needed to ensure that their renewable energy grid would be able to thrive in the face of opposition. They needed to shore up funding, gain even more public support, and push forward with their mission despite the challenges that lay ahead. They called an emergency meeting with their core team to discuss their next steps. "We've won the battle, but we're not out of the woods yet," Noah said, standing at the head of the table. "Reynolds Energy isn't going to give up without a fight. We need to prepare for their next move, and we need to keep pushing forward with our grid. The people are on our side, but we can't let them forget what's at stake." Sarah spoke up, her voice resolute. "We've seen a significant increase in interest from both investors and governments. People are starting to believe in the power of renewable energy, and we can't afford to slow down now. This is our moment to solidify our place in the future of energy." Elon nodded. "We need to scale quickly, build partnerships with smaller energy providers, and make sure that the grid is both accessible and reliable. If we do that, the momentum will only continue to grow." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Noah and Elon worked tirelessly, not just to keep their renewable energy project afloat, but to expand it to the farthest reaches of the globe. The energy grid began to take shape as they expanded their operations, signing contracts with countries eager to embrace sustainable energy solutions. The fight against Reynolds Energy was far from over, but now they had something even more powerful than evidence: the support of the people. The day came when the renewable energy grid went fully operational in a major country, a moment that marked the beginning of a new era in energy production. It wasn't just about technology. It was about a vision. A vision of a world where the people could control their own energy future, without the influence of corrupt corporations and political players trying to preserve the old order. Noah and Elon stood together on a stage in front of thousands of people, the grid's lights shining brightly in the background. The moment had come. It was a moment they had worked for, sacrificed for, and fought for. "This is just the beginning," Noah said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We've faced immense challenges, and we've fought back against those who wanted to keep us down. But the future is now. This energy grid will empower generations to come, and we will not stop until the world is powered by clean, sustainable energy." Elon stood next to him, smiling with a quiet pride. "The path was never easy, and it still won't be. But today, we've shown that change is possible. And together, we're going to build a future where energy is a right for everyone, not a privilege for the few." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing in the open air. Noah and Elon shared a moment of silence as they looked out at the faces of those who had supported them, the dreamers, the believers, the ones who had always known that the world could be different. And in that moment, Noah felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The fight wasn't over. It never would be. But they had made a real difference. They had built something that would last, something that would change the world. As the years passed, the renewable energy grid continued to grow. More and more countries adopted sustainable energy solutions, and the grip of fossil fuel companies began to loosen. Reynolds Energy, now a shadow of its former self, had finally been held accountable for its actions. The world had moved on, and the future was brighter than anyone had imagined. And as Noah and Elon looked back on their journey, they knew that it wasn't just about the technology they had created. It was about the change they had sparked. The revolution they had ignited. And the world they had helped to build, a world where the people had the power to shape their own future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?